Well, hello, George. Welcome to this talk with the Working Brother.
Thanks a lot, working brother.
Tell
Um,
us what you do, and what you are, and what we're going to talk about today.
well, I've been a uh, overseas contractor in Iraq and Afghanistan for the past 12 years. I'm also research. I do a lot of academic research. My academic research is the unified behavioral theory, which is based on a research design of correlating the Hume Smith Kant research design versus a Marx Engels or Rousseau Marx Engels research design. Because all the entire field of philosophy which focuses on ultimate causation boils down to two competing theories. uh, the Hume-Smith model focuses on a non-central controller theory, and the Marx-Engels theory is a centrally planned argument. After the Cold War, all the centrally planned governments, the Marxist governments, all ended up in failure. So after the ideological experiments ended, the Rousseau Marx Engels theories should have been discarded on the foundational political, economic, and geopolitical levels in philosophy. The university systems should have gravitated towards a Hume Smith Kant theory, not just on the philosophical level, but on the social scientific level also. So if you move from the research design to the Cartesian model, you can develop, the foundational level splits the pre-Darwinian, pre-Freudian foundational level in philosophy from the 18th century splits into evolutionary theory and post-Freudian psychology. So that splits into two. Tooby and Cosmides have in their psychological foundations of culture, and later on with David Buss in the handbook of narrow evolutionary psychology, introduce a integrated causal model linking biology, evolutionary biology, and narrow evolutionary psychology into one seamless theory. So from that, I just built. You can rearrange enough psychological theories, well, to actually schematize the whole field of psychological personality theories. The books that I use in that is Freud's Beyond the Pleasure Principle, where he talks about his life and death instinct theory. That's operationalized by Erich Fromm in The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness. And then a guy named Salvatore Matti is a professor at UCSB, University of California, Santa Barbara, that had schematized psychological personality theories in the late 70s or late 60s, early 70s. His book was called Personality Theories, Critical Analysis. He wasn't sure which one was the overarching dominant theory at the time. So he he thought that Fromm had the right overarching analysis because he was advancing Freud's life and death instinct theory. But his later books, Fromm wrote Anatomy of Human Destructiveness after Salvatore Matti had written his 71 book. So with Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, Fromm clearly has the overarching dichotomy that can schematize the entire field of psychological personality theories.
All right,
It's
if
just
I can interject just a little bit, because we just got off the bat and you dove into the deep end right away. So I just want to tell the viewers that this is going to get very technical, and we are also going to go into all the details for the more astute viewers, and we can start going through the document if you don't mind that you've set up for us. That
yeah.
goes.
Let me finish this real quick, and then we'll get into
All
it.
right.
Um, because once you have a constructive versus destructive dichotomy in the psychological theories, And now getting to the macro theory point, because we're going to do macro studies. Aristotle's six forms of government had a proper and perverted form, which is on a constructive versus destructive dichotomy. So the post-Freudian psychological personality theories actually match up with Aristotle's six forms of government. So you can actually get one big giant theory of human behavior if you put those two together. In the field of economics, because your degree is in economics, you have virtuous versus vicious economic cycles. So again, you have a constructive versus destructive behavioral dynamic. So if you put those disciplines actually can go together in one big singular theory, then your outcome measure would be first and second more developed countries, and third and fourth world countries, which would be less developed countries, fourth world being failed states. The first world countries or more developed countries are higher economic growth, lower population growth, higher wage labor and equity. And the less developed countries are the opposite. They're lower economic growth and higher population growth. So you can connect the macro theories, because democracies only exist in high economic growth, low population growth conditions. So, but you can correlate Aristotle's six forms of government to, well, per capita GDP function in a macro sense, correlating economic rates of change over population growth rates of change, and then correlate that into the first, second, third, and fourth world countries. And you have a complete series of macro theories that rise and fall on a tight versus catastrophically loose wage labor basis. So when you see a change in one, you can look over and you're going to find a change in the other. So that's the way I do my overarching analysis, because at the rate that the third world, developing world's populations are growing, the global wage labor rate is plummeting. So it can't go on forever. The global tendency is for everything to devolve into a fourth world failed state right now. Like, well, we'll get into that later. It's in, if this was aeronautics theory, the wage labor rate would be like gravity. It's going to pull everything towards a certain direction. But we'll get into we'll get into how to build physics models in a future discussion. I just wanted to say that I'm taking the Enlightenment philosophies of old, and you can put it into a series of analytic frameworks, and you can actually eventually we'll be able to mathematize the whole thing. I need to get with the game theory people to actually do that part, because they specialize in that. So I do the overarching global analysis, and then I take these methodologies, then I apply it to the regional analysis. So the kind of analysis I'm doing is it uses a lot of existing frameworks within the overarching frameworks. This is a different channel that we're developing here, because there's a whole bunch of news channels on YouTube. There's a ton of them. But hardly anybody is talking about an actual geostrategic channel and this kind of analysis. So we want to introduce this. It's more for a graduate school crowd, that's obvious, but it's a niche that is missing in YouTube. And I think we should go ahead and try to develop a channel like this.
Definitely. This is very, how should I say, crucial information that impacts a lot of people by the definition of the size of the areas that it influences. And very few people are, let's say, in tune with what's actually going on, and how it's not all random and spontaneous, but is either a strategy or a policy or a reaction to that.
Yeah. If you want to actually start clicking through the slide set, we can kind of get into a little bit of pictures. Oh yeah, okay. So right there on the first slide set, with the rise of population, you have a plummeting global wage labor rate. So yeah, we'll go through there and we'll talk about why. Okay. Yeah, we don't have to read the slide set, but here I just want, for the purpose of this conversation. Okay, yeah, let's just stop at this one. This graph was produced by Robert Fogel. He got a Nobel Prize in 1993. I got it written down on top. It correlates to two trends of technology and population growth over time. So it took about 1 billion years of people on the planet. It took several 100,000 years of people on the planet to reach 1 billion people in 1804. Mm-hmm. And since 1804, there is a logarithmic increase in global population. So with the rise of technology, you have a severe rise in population over time. So over the past 200 years since the Industrial Revolution, global population growth has been greatly outpacing global economic growth, and it's a condition that cannot go on forever. So if you click on, click down a little bit. All right. So the Northern Hemisphere countries, the population has been relatively flat. So most of the population growth is in Latin America, Africa, and South Asia. And that's depicted in the purple section of the maps. So it has the population leveling off after 2050 is what that depicts. But there's no reason for it to actually, as far as mathematical formulae, for that to start to plateau at the higher levels. They're actually predicting that either you'll have family planning in the less developed countries, or you have a cataclysmic event where it just kills people off. And that's what I've been talking to Michael Yon about lately, because he was on the Jordan Peterson show talking about that. He talks about it in terms of a lot of agricultural producing countries won't be able to get fertilizer because most of the fertilizer comes from ammonium nitrate that comes from Russia. Yeah. There's sanctions on Russia. So what we were talking about was, even in Thailand, that is extremely that exports food. They're very food sufficient internally, and they export it. Mm-hmm. But they import 90 some odd % of their fertilizer. Yep. Most of it coming from Russia. Yep. So if that gets cut off, then a country that's actually food rich can actually become food scarce in a relatively short period of time. So what he's focusing on is you have a strategic commodity, and what happens if that strategic commodity goes away? Mm-hmm. Then what happens to your food source? So that's what I've been talking to Michael Yon about. Yeah, here's, okay. Why is this predictive analysis? What this slide talks about, if you have two trends of technology and population growth, and there's predictiveness, the second trend is jobs have been moving south, and you have a mass migration of people moving north. So if you have those two things that are fixed, then you can say, well, how does that affect the global wage labor rate? Well, it's plummeting. So then how is that going to affect the 4-category geopolitical form model? Well, more countries are going to end up sliding out of first world countries to second and third world countries. I mean, people start looking at, well, the United States income is dropping. The standard of living in Europe is dropping. So people already see it. The debts are rising. And, you get a lot of indicators that people naturally see. So with my frameworks of analysis, you can actually start determining how it's going to actually affect democracy. If you have, when jobs move south, the companies make more money because you have an increase of demand because population globally is going up. So their increased demand for commodities increases, but when you move to southern labor markets, you're paying less in labor, so the profits, their costs decrease and their profits increase. So with that correlation, that explains why wealth disparity in first world countries is increasing. So with the two primary trends of technology and population growth and the two secondary trends of jobs moving south, people moving north, you see where the global wage labor equilibrium is occurring. But then what does that mean as far as first and second and third and fourth world countries? Well, the first world countries are going to be slipping down to second and third world countries. But if you actually have a Weimar financial collapse in the first world, you can move from first to fourth with a Weimar Republic or an Argentina type inflation. So people that are living in terms of presentism, where things have always pretty much been fine in the United States and Europe, things aren't so bad. Well, we're talking about what variable has to change for that not to no longer be the case. So therefore, we're going to focus our research on monitoring those areas. So in this case, it's going to be with the Russian war, it's going to be an increase in commodities prices and people fleeing the petrodollar system. So that's why we did videos with Felix Rex and Matt. I talk about pipelines and petrodollars because that's going to push the rest of the commodities prices up, which is going to lower the standards of living for people in first world countries. And if you have a decline in the petrodollar, that negatively affects Wall Street and the city of London, where the big financial houses are, it's going to have severe collateral negative damage in the first world countries.
Let's move into your explanation of the failure of the socialist systems.
Yeah, move down. Oh, okay. Well, all right. Yeah, okay. I haven't gotten into this with anybody yet. Yeah, actually, I was preparing this for a much longer slide set, and I pulled it out.
Touch on it briefly so people can get the background, and then we'll move on, and we'll discuss it in detail another time.
Yeah. Okay, so we were talking about my my four category geopolitical form model, where first world countries have high economic growth and low population growth, and fourth world failed states usually have low economic growth and high population growth, and second and third world countries are going to be in between. So then I used a per capita GNP function in a macro sense. It's usually used in a micro sense to get median wage labor rate calculations. This, I use it to mean economic growth theories over population growth rates of change per each region. That's significant because I can take, if you're looking at classical growth theories, you're still looking at technology and population growth, but then that's been advanced by endogenous growth theories that directly factor in, Solow-Swan models that actually calculate technology and population growth in terms of infrastructure and machine tools and factories and economic organizations. So it covers an array of economic indicators that we track in Pomesian dime theory. Dime theory is diplomatic, infrastructure, military, and economic comparisons between countries. Pomesi is political, military, economic, social, infrastructural, and informational, because communications and transportation are always two big drivers. So those aspects are covered in different sets of economic theories that once you correlate it to population growth rates of change, you can now move the social sciences from a static description model into dynamic modeling, where you can start saying, well, if these two trends keep on going, what are the overall trends going to do? And then if you can start making predictions on that, then you're going to start looking at what the leaders are doing in each region to counteract it. So it tells you what to look for, where and how, what to look for. So the second a leader does one thing, I already know what the collateral effects are going to be, or at least I have a good idea.
Based on other examples that you've studied, and theories that have been proven correct, basically.
Right. I was having a conversation with one of the guys in the background, and things come out. While game theory itself is a lot of contrived circumstances, it shows you how the solutions are relatively finite.
Mm-hmm.
When you start to get into national equilibrium compromises between countries, that's telling where both people will take a compromise to get a constructive outcome, but it's suboptimal.
Yeah.
Neither side gets 100% what it wants. If you have a cooperative solution where both increase production, then that's a Pareto optimal situation where both countries will use their comparative advantages to increase their living standards. So you can add the game theory interaction between world leaders to actually look to see whether they're going to get, human behaviors come down to positive sum gains, which are Fromm's productive character orientation, or the sadomasochistic character orientations of zero sum games, which are extractive, or negative sum sabotage. So when we talk about what's going on in each area, and the United States went from a regime change, nation building strategy, which wasn't done right. Now we're into a regime change destabilization program. You see a switch from something that could have been productive and constructive, but is now destructive. So now you can start looking for a whole bunch of negative consequences, going from the psychological aspect of it to Aristotle's 6 forms of government, to the economic change of it, and the geopolitical change where everything is going to drop. So globally right now, by looking at these by looking at these different frameworks, that commodities prices are going to increase, inflation is going to increase, so standards of living are going to plummet. So you have wage labor rates, cost of living decreasing because global population is J-curving and overcoming global economic growth. But also now you have a big, huge disruption with the sanctions on Russia. So now you have two things that are exasperating the negative situation.
I think in the last minute and a half, you basically summed up very well how your analysis and everything ties together. I think we'll stop recording for now, leave this as a 25-minute intro, and get people asking for more. What do you think about that?
Oh, yeah, whatever you want to do is fine.